Good day, familia. This is Rafael Rey Collazo, and you're watching and listening to The Collazo Show. The Collazo Show, the home for conversations at the intersection of leadership, politics, and cultura. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for my Substack watchers, which the show gets aired exclusively first, premieres on Substack. So you want to follow me on Substack for first sneak peek of every episode of The Collazo Show. We're also on YouTube at The Collazo Show. And we are now an audio show at the Collazo Show podcast. So all of my audio files, anywhere you can download and listen to a podcast, we encourage you to do so. On this edition of the Collazo Show, you know, we oftentimes kind of harp on the and you know, kind of struggle and rant and pontificate about the current state of affairs. And one of the things that my very special guest has been leading in his work at Unidos US is not, you know, beyond the state of where we're at, really thinking about and creating systems and policies that are authentically generated from our communities that can relate a proactive vision of what we want to see in our politics and our policies. So it goes well beyond, okay, and we hear this all the time, right? Like, okay, everyone complain, but what are you about to do about it? And so my very special guest and my very good friend is doing something about it. And him and his team at Unidos US have really put a lot of work over the last year plus to come up with a vision about what advocates and people that that are concerned about economic justice for everyone and civil rights, particularly amongst the Latino and immigrant populations. What would be policies and what kind of leadership would we want to see amongst government officials across all sectors that would actually open the doors of opportunity and not blame us in the case of some of the political leadership we have in this country now for everyone's problems. So welcome to the show, a great friend. And we're going to talk about some other fun stuff later on in the show, including his NBA team that has a real shot this year. But we'll see what happens. Let's welcome to the show Familia, who's got a very special announcement about a project he's working on that he recently introduced publicly. The senior vice president for programs at Unidos US, my great friend Mauricio Garcia. What's up, brother?
Hey, man. Hi, Ray. What's going on?
I'm hanging in there. We'll talk about your hoops team later. We're both great hoops fans.
I can talk about that all show if you want.
I'm sure you could, and we'll do that once the NBA playoff starts. We'll bring you back on. Interesting that Mauricio, that you know, I got to figure out who your booker is, because you obviously are in very high demand, because it was more difficult to get you on my show. I came up with a list of people that were easier to get than Mauricio Garcia on my show. I mean, we give my top 5. K7, freestyle legend. K7, Zunga Zang was easier to get on my show than Mauricio Garcia. Bernie Williams, what did he win, 5 World Series or something?
Wow, yeah, he did.
Was easier to get on my show than Mauricio Garcia. Frank Negron, Salsa Superstar was easier to get. Residente, who has 31 Grammys, was easier to get on my show than Mauricio Garcia. Anyway, a man of high demand, but well deserved. I'm teasing him. Mauricio, and you know, for full disclosure, you know, this show is a totally independent show that is my own personal views. But indeed, Mauricio and I are co-workers at Unidos US, formerly National Council of La Raza, the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights organization. And Mauricio is really leading a very important initiative for us at Unidos. So I sort of teed it up for you, Mauricio, with my opening comments that our teams at Unidos and other stakeholders in the Hispanic space, frankly, have been really thinking about over the last year plus, you know, what kind of leadership our community needs right now, not only to protect and defend kind of where we're at, and that's very precarious, but what's kind of a progressive vision for what we want to see moving forward so that we can actually build off the gains that we've made in this country from a civil rights perspective and an economic justice perspective and build off it. So before we get into the actual document and product that you've created that we want to share with our listeners, but why don't you start with what has that process been like at Unidos and with you and your team, Mauricio, to take stock in where the Latino community is at that led to the creation of this agenda that we're going to share in a moment?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again. And for those wondering, it's the Detroit Pistons we're going to be talking about later. So this economic agenda, which we're calling the economic prosperity agenda, is really years in the making. It's really a way of encapsulating and bringing together the work that Unidos US and all of our partners, our affiliates, have been working on for decades. But in earnest, it really is a manifestation of work that we did over the last year and a half, 2 years, where we heard loud and clear that, you've probably talked about it on the show, we've talked about it in other spaces, the economy, everyday economic issues, affordability, the cost of fill in the blank, right? Your cost of housing, the lack of, wages that keep up with expenses. We've heard jokingly the cost of eggs. Everything has been a drain. Everything is expensive. Everything is really difficult. And we've been working at that at Unidos US for many decades, working in partnership with our 300 affiliate organizations around the country, the East Coast, Southwest, West, all over the place, all over the country. We've done significant amount of work on the policy side and on the advocacy side. And so, that inspired this, but we heard loud and clear, to get very specific, through the results of the 2024 election, that affordability was on the ballot. And whether or not, the parties read into that and did stuff about it, I'll leave it to other folks to opine on that. But we heard Latinos say that the affordability was on the ballot, and we've heard it every election thereafter. And we know this because, not just anecdotally, not just because we talk to our affiliates, and that's important, that qualitative discussion, those conversations we have with our peers and our colleagues and our familia across the country, but it's because we've done polling at Unidos US that consistently says that the cost of living, the cost of housing, the lack of good jobs, the cost of healthcare are critically important. They keep us up at night. They keep our communities up at night. So we knew we had to do something. And on top of it, like when the election happened, and we heard the priorities of the administration, one of which would be immigration enforcement. We knew then, and we've seen it play out, that when you do that, there is an immediate impact, not just on civil rights and civil liberties and just the social side, but also on the economic side. Local economies are hurting as a result of, we've been seeing this barrage in our communities around immigration enforcement. But that's what we knew. But let me take you back to late spring last year. So armed with that information, we said, let's affirm and perhaps maybe even dispel some of the things we thought we knew, or affirm the things that we've heard and we've read and we've researched and all that. So we hit the road, and we went to community after community in partnership with one of our community-based affiliate organizations to listen to community members, to listen to small business owners, to listen to multi-generation families, mixed status families, to listen to elected officials, a variety of people. And it wasn't for us to share, this is what Unidos US is doing, or this is what we're hearing. It's really to lay the framework down and really listen to what keeps them up at night. And consistently, in the 15 different states that we went to, and among the 600 plus people that we ended up speaking with, the first thing that came up, dating from the first session, which I believe you were at in North Carolina, to the last one that we had in Stockton, California, was immigration enforcement. Initially, it was the fear, the anxiety of that happening, potentially happening. And then gradually, as we were going across the country, crisscrossing across the country, we saw it going from the fear and the potential fear and anxiety to the fear hitting, and then it becoming what it became, as we saw in Chicago, Minneapolis, and LA. And that consistently was the first thing. And you cannot divorce the impact that has on local economies, on people going to your local bodega, to people going to work. I was in Rochester, New York. I live in New York City. So this happens here, but in Rochester, New York, we was in a listening session, and this came up a couple times. Folks in Rochester may have to go 20, 30, 40 minutes outside of the city for work. And public transportation isn't that great there, so they have to get in their car. People were fearful of getting in their car and spending that much time in their car, going to where they they get their paycheck because they were fearful that they might be stopped and maybe they wouldn't make it back home. So
If I could just add to that, Mauricio, because I was a part of many of these activities, is that even when you live in these communities and you kind of know, but you don't fully know until you kind of really are very, you take the time to take this kind of care to listen. And one of the pieces that tied in for me in a way I didn't fully appreciate until we did this exercise around the country. And Mauricio's right. It was literally coast to coast. We talked to folks in different environments, different Thai cities, all kind of different diverse communities. And the piece around how much immigration enforcement impacted not just like the broad economy, but like micro economies of Hispanic neighborhoods. So one raid, so if they go to one store, whether or not even to grab somebody or the result of that incursion, it gets around the neighborhood real quick. And then what happens is, to your point, people are scared to go to work. People are scared, regardless of their own personal immigration status. People are scared to just support Hispanic business, sit in the taqueria because you never know when these guys are going to show up, and they don't want to be in that environment. They're just, and people lost employees.
Yep.
And then it was stacked on the part that I didn't fully appreciate, Mauricio, was from a Hispanic business perspective, was this was also the tariff piece was stacked on top of that.
Yes.
So there's so many, all these, and then all that microeconomic dynamic impact those microeconomies. So all of this immigration enforcement not just impacted Latinos from like a social fabric perspective, it impacted our bottom line in our local neighborhoods.
Big time. And what we saw is, just to reinforce what you just said, people were already hyper concerned about their everyday, their pocketbooks, right? Like,
that's right.
Puedo ir al restaurante, puedo ir al mercado. And it became on top of that tariffs, fear, this, that, and the other barrage of news. And so, and that does sort of filter out in the community pretty quickly. So we going back to the listening session, we heard that loud and clear. And then we heard about, the cost of housing, no matter if you were in, Stockton, whether you're in Rochester, whether we were in Tampa, we were in Nashville, cost of housing, whether, that's not talking about home ownership, just rental. People have just difficulty of being able to pay the rent. We heard about the lack of not just jobs, but good jobs that have benefits that allow you to think about, like, if I have to have an emergency, if my kid is sick today, or if my aging parent has an emergency, if I take that job, we'll have that job. So those sorts of things kept coming up over and over again. And so we did all those listening sessions. We listened from all sorts of people. And it's worth saying that, like, a listening session in Rochester, New York is very different from a listening session in Nashville in terms of the demographics and everything. But like the issues were similar, if not the same.
Very similar.
And so all that ultimately, I joke around with my team, like, a listening session in the South Bronx is going to be different from a listening session in Phoenix. It's going to be like different backgrounds coming in, but the content that comes out of it is the same.
And we're actually seeing that, by the way, in the political polling, that if you follow the political part of it, is that the regional nuances in Latino voter behaviors and their attitudes about what's going on now and how they're voting now in reality, right? And since the end of 2025 is actually not that different. Right. I mean, obviously Florida is always a little bit of an exception, but it's actually not as extreme as it used to be. And the Northeast and the Southwest, Latinos across the country, there's a lot of consensus about what's going on and consensus about what they want to see people doing about it. So we've kind of teased it, Mauricio, but so, a few weeks ago, Unidos US released, under your leadership and some of our other colleagues, our economic prosperity agenda. So tell us a little bit about this agenda and what, before we get into the pillars of it, what are we attempting to do by releasing it? A little bit about, what kind of guide this gives us as advocates to advocate for our community for economic justice and civil rights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So 3 weeks ago we launched this economic prosperity agenda, and just to sort of sometimes agendas can be very wonky, can be very sort of, policy oriented, and there's elements of that, of course. But this is really based a values-based framework, a values-based document and strategy. And as we just talked about, it's really grounded in what we heard, and which is what Latino families and other working class communities across the U.S. actually want, and what they actually need to thrive for not just their families or their communities to thrive and to achieve that economic prosperity, but for the country. Because we firmly believe at Unidos that if the Latino community thrives economically, the country will absolutely thrive and economically. And if it's the opposite, then the country will not. We know that. We believe that. And so, as I mentioned, it's built on, all those listening sessions. It's, all the polling that we've done, all the research that we've done in partnership with so many different partners around the country, and all the work that we've done with that network that I mentioned, our affiliate network. And so, by getting to the pillars, based on what we heard and based on all the other pieces that I talked about, there's four key pillars that center this agenda. One is housing. So building wealth through home ownership and ensuring that every family has a safe and stable place to thrive and put down roots.
Well, let's start right there. Because I think it's I think there's two things I wanted to share, and then we'll get into the housing conversation. The first one is, I think the fact that the way we framed this agenda is also in response to the feedback we got in the community. Yeah. Because one of the dynamics that happens, and again, like Mauricio said, regardless of how you voted or chose not to vote or not in 2024, Latinos across the political spectrum were telling us the same thing. This concern around economic anxiety, right? And actually, most Americans were telling us the same thing. Yeah. But one of the dynamics that came out and really became acute in these follow-up conversations, this listening tour that Mauricio helped lead around the country with us, was that there's a sector of the Latino community, if you want to say more business oriented, more conservative economically, I don't know how you want to couch it, maybe the younger set, especially young men, that look at these issues more from like it's like in this religious mode, like a prosperity gospel, where it's like, I don't want to think about these issues in the context of trying to escape poverty and social safety net of being poor. I want to blow up. I want to give me a pathway to make money and be prosperous. And they want to think about this in a more optimistic way, not just like escaping poverty. So I think some of the language that we chose for this agenda, I think, speaks to that. And then the housing part, I think it's, I've seen it in this work since like 2017, 2018. I think Latino neighborhoods were really the canary in the coal mine around this housing affordability crisis, because a lot of our neighborhoods were the ones getting gentrified during that time period. And I saw it from a very personal level. We were doing similar work in traditional historic Hispanic communities. I'm talking about West San Antonio, Little Havana, South Phoenix, North Philly, where I grew up, that those neighborhoods were starting to be gentrified. And they were that's where I saw the housing affordability issue really coming. Now it was in Hispanic areas first in a lot of ways, in Black areas. Now it's affecting everybody.
Everyone.
So talk about, Mauricio, why it was so important for housing not only be a pillar, to be the first pillar, because that really triggers so many other things.
Yeah, I mean, just from a, part of, to your point about like the framing of this agenda. And I go back to, this isn't a traditional policy paper. This is rooted in lived experience and community. So first and foremost, we went through the exercise of really defining what prosperity means. And the first thing was a decent home. Why? Because if you have a decent home, you have a foundation for the work, for a place where you can actually spend time with your family, the freedom to gather on weekends. And we talked about, the being able to have your carne asada on a Saturday with your cousins and your friends in your backyard. If you have a backyard in New York City, maybe it's on your stoop or your fire escape. Yeah. But to cook, to celebrate, to laugh, that dignity piece was critical to this. But the home is the foundation for that. And so, we've been doing work at Unidos US around housing and homeownership for many decades. And recently, over the course of, I guess now 3 years ago, we launched an initiative around homeownership. Homeownership means equity, home. And, doing trailblazing work there, both on the research side, elevating solutions in the housing space that are really working in different communities. But through that work, we went deep into understanding why home ownership. Like there's arguments out there that like, home ownership, we shouldn't put so much focus on the home and purchasing the home. And, that's fair in some regards. But at the end of the day, we know just mere data that a Latino homeowner has the 26 times more wealth than a Latino renter. That's staggering. That's huge.
I don't think we can emphasize it enough. And I'm bringing it up not just for the reason Mauricio said, is that, and look, most families, period, the basis of the wealth you are able to accumulate is through your home ownership. So that's, but even more fundamentally, for our country to prosper, it is critically important that we are able to give Latino families the tools they need to buy homes and to get into homes. Because I think it's and I don't know if you know the statistic, but some crazy statistic, like for us to be on par with the home ownership and the amount of homes we need to build and fill them in the next X amount of years, like the majority of those homes have to be bought by Latinos. And by the way, familia, who's going to build those pup? We have to build a lot more. So who's going to build them? Who's going to be the construction workers? Who's going to do the sheetrock? Who's going to be the architects? Who's going to be the mortgage, the bilingual, bicultural mortgage broker, realtor, title agent, insurer? I mean, that's the basis of what the U.S. economy, bread and butter, has to be. I mean, we can talk about AI and all that, but in terms of like what's going to build community and build wealth for working people in this country, it's getting this housing piece right, especially for Latinos. Your second pillar for the agenda, Mauricio, is labor and workforce development. Tell us about that.
I mean, this one is, so let me just start with the data. By the end of this decade, which is here, now we're on the other side of this decade, nearly 80% of new workers in this country, and you just said it, will be Latino, regardless of the industry, regardless of, the trade or whatever, but that's nearly 80% of new workers. That's, what are we doing to be able to support those workers? And yes, there's threats right now that may, folks Latino communities are, seeing that where they see themselves in that, but that's a reality. We're going to be the workforce. We are, and will continue to be the workforce of this country. So the question is, okay, we're the workforce now, but do we have the ability to move and accumulate wealth and grow and not just stagnate and stay at a job or just, jump from job to job because that's the way things go. And there's so many people that are earning cash, right? They're cash earners. They're folks that are hustling. How are we supporting them in being able to do that, to achieve that prosperity that we're talking about? And so this is where the job comes in, because we know, as Latinos, first, second, third plus generations, we're sending money back home to our home countries too. We're supporting family there. We're supporting family here. We're trying to do what we can, doing multiple jobs. So if there isn't this ability to invest into the workforce system, to have dignity in the workplace, being able to have the time to care for people as emergencies arise, then we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. And so for us, investing in it and advocating for it and having solutions like programs, like initiatives that bring different partners together. So one of the things, and the last thing I'll say, economic development, we're talking about like big, huge investments in there. How are workers involved in that? How is workforce development part of that conversation? And it's happening here piecemeal. What we're saying is more of those things, workforce needs to be at the center of this. And Latino workers, because we know that we're majority of the workforce in many of these things, data centers, let's not even start talking about data centers. We're a part of that, but we're not, if we're talking about values, how are we valued if we're still making what we're making today? If there still isn't protections in place for that worker?
It's interesting. and I encourage you to go into our Unidos US website. We've got a wealth of information, including polling around Latinos' attitudes and concerns around these issues. And the vast majority of Latinos tell us consistently that their economic anxieties, are their biggest concern. But it's interesting because it gets divvied up between thinking about it from a cost perspective. So there's a big chunk of Latinos that tell us things are just too expensive. And we've gone through that. Housing, compra, utilities, their gas to go to work, so on and so on. Then there's another framing that Latinos use, which I think get at this particular pillar, which I think is so important, which is Latinos feel rightfully so that, wow, we work harder than anybody practically in terms of our labor participation. We're working 2-3 jobs, but our work productivity and our work volume is not matching the wages we should be earning. So that also speaks to labor law, unionization. We're in the fight, Mauricio. I don't know if you saw, but we just got the Pennsylvania House of Representatives on the House side just passed raising the minimum wage. We still have the federal minimum wage in Pennsylvania. And, that's been an ongoing fight for, over a decade. And, we'll see what happens with it now in the Republican controlled Pennsylvania State Senate. But my point is that, having the training, the education, and funneling Latinos who have plenty of skills, plenty of it growing in terms of college attainment, funneling them into training programs and workforce tracks that'll get them paid what they deserve. So I think that's very instructive. The third piece of the pillar, Mauricio, is entrepreneurship, which is something that is definitely with the younger generation and immigrant communities really resonated in our conversations around the country.
Yeah, and so currently, we Latino-owned businesses have employ nearly 4 million people around the country, and that generates nearly a little over 650 billion in revenue. Let's just stop, and that's huge. But just imagine if the number of Latinos in the U.S., which is 1 in 5, if that same 1 in 5 were small businesses or small business owners, that would represent an additional 11 trillion business revenue and $2.5 trillion in pay for workers over a decade. So, we're already starting businesses at the speed of which are faster than most communities, and Latina women are the fastest growing entrepreneurs, period. And that's happening, and we're seeing that happening more and more because of what we're seeing in the political environment. And so for us small businesses, what's key here is we're growing in number and we're employing more folks, but it's the lack of this capital to invest in your business, to grow the businesses. It's the mentorship that's needed, that community. We have so many great Latino organizations that are supporting Latino entrepreneurs, but they're strapped as well. So we need more of that. And so for us, is how is the system changing? How would you influence the system so that we can access those and have people have trust in those entrepreneurs? Because we've shown when there has been that trust, we can generate results, and we can generate, when it comes to business, we can generate dollars.
There's a whole other set of conversations, and Mauricio, you're going to be part of them here moving forward on the Collazo show related to this piece around how Latino entrepreneurs access capital. There's kind of the high-end conversation about the lack of access that Latinos and people of color have when it relates to, angel investors and kind of that Silicon Valley level of investment.
Yeah.
But just like on the street level, and how many of us, our families, let's keep it real, started businesses because of the local loan shark that, gave you the initial $5,000 so you could open the bodega or open this, open that. But every couple of weeks they came around and they got you real bad on the interest on that bad boy. That's part of how we grew up. That's part of even a lot of our success stories were based off that. My great grandfather in Puerto Rico, Mauricio, was a loan shark. Because I'm like, anyway, so it's all a conversation, but that kind of like underground, access to capital is very limited and very fraught, and we need to get our folks, whether it's the banking, we need to work with our financial partners in the banking industry to open up those opportunities, and the government to open up those opportunities for our small business owners, because as we've seen, and of course, Bad Bunny and Rimas is the extreme case, being arguably one of the greatest small business stories in American history, that when we have access to the resources, we could do great things. The last pillar, my friend, talk to me, Mauricio, about family security, which is one that also has been a cultural one we need to talk more about in the Latino community.
Yeah, and this is one that, just from an Unidos US perspective, we've done so much work on this. I mean, we worked on all of these, but this one, it perhaps maybe doesn't get the press that the other ones do. I will say it that way. So this is about ensuring families can care for our loved ones, for our familias, for our tios, for our tias, abuelas. We all know that happens. We're all supporting multiple people financially or in other ways. And so, and what we're specifically talking about in this pillar is so paid leave, childcare, income supports, but doing so without sacrificing economic stability. Oftentimes we're saying, if you need this, then you can't do this.
Yeah.
That can't be the case. We're saying, no, we need to do this. So what sort of system do we have to be able to support that? And that's the heart of this particular pillar.
Yeah, no, and thinking about Mauricio, some of the work we've done in California around the Cal Savers program
Yep.
to assist Latino working people that most times don't have access to 401ks at their job, to give them an opportunity to be able to save money, invest, and regardless of how you feel about it from a social or spiritual perspective, the more you can open up opportunities for young families and young women, and the things like not just education, there are obvious things, but childcare, and healthcare, paid family leave. The better our economy is going to be, and the more we're going to have in the workforce and building businesses and using all their talents. So that's just one example of the kind of family security that we need. Mauricio, we've got people excited about this. Tell people how what we're doing with this agenda. We're going back on the road, and also how can people, and I'll have the links in the show notes. But how do we want people to support this effort and be part of this our agenda here?
Yeah, so first of all, these are the things we talked about, high level, our beliefs. These are things that, we want people to have access to good jobs and home ownership and family security and all that. What we're doing is elevating solutions. So things we're seeing in communities that are working, whether it's an initiative, a program, a policy, or something that we saw that had some momentum or has having momentum, we Unidos want to elevate those and use our platform to have it. So folks, if you are seeing something that's really, really exciting and that you want to be able to share with us, like, hey, check this program out because that's having an impact, let us know. Right? We'll give you the information on how to get a hold of us. The other thing is, it's like you said, we're going back on the road. The key thing here is we want to be able to start this message. So we want to have conversations with decision makers. And by decision makers, I mean people in Congress, people vying for Congress, people in the business community, people in philanthropy, other national organizations. We want to have these deeper conversations with them to share these elements and say, hey, take this, run with it, make it your own. We don't care. We just know that if we invest in these solutions and these things and this vision, the needle will be moved for the positive. And so we're going to continue those conversations. But a big part of that is going back into community in partnership with a lot of other organizations, in partnership with elected officials, and be able to sort of talk about it more and be able to spark that sort of that excitement around it, because we need advocates, we need voices, we need evangelists for this. It can't just be Unidos US. It has to be a full collective. And so that's a big part of what we're doing between now at the end of the year. But this continues. This agenda is evergreen on purpose, because the values and the things I talked about don't just matter for 2026. They matter for the next year. They matter till 28 and beyond. And so we're gonna get out there as we go into community. We'll share with Ray, and you can share that with your folks. If they want to come, if they want to join us, then please do. But at a minimum, click the links, share it on socials, reach out to us, learn more. The more we do that. And I guess the last thing is we have over 60 organizations, national and local organizations, that have endorsed this. And so if you know an organization by you that should be endorsing these values, let them know about it and have them reach out to us as well, because the power's in the collective, so we can work together and really move the needle on this.
And I had, while Mauricio was speaking, I put the actual link, if you were, and hopefully people were able to copy it while it was up there, but also I'll put it in the show notes. If people actually literally wanted to sign up themselves or their organization onto our agenda, we have many affiliate organizations, labor unions, business councils, that have already signed on to working with us, and we're going to be having events around the country in Colorado and throughout the country in the coming weeks. We were just on the phone talking about the one we're going to do in Central Valley, in I think probably Cinco de Mayo, which will be cool. So we're going to be going coast to coast to continue these conversations. I would just say to wrap up this part of the conversation is that, you know, I and I actually have my nifty physical copy here of the agenda, is that I just want folks to say that this really, I think we deserve a lot of credit for this, because this really came in response ultimately because people did not feel, particularly in the political process, they were being, and particularly the Latino community, they were being listened to. And what folks thought that they think about it a little differently, you know, whether it's more from an entrepreneurial hat or a generational hat or a different sort of political orientation. But there's a lot of consensus in our community about these issues in terms of where things need to be. But we just kind of, so I think what people are going to find with our economic prosperity agenda is that it addresses the framing of a lot of these principles that Latinos are telling us. They want us not just to be against someone or some things or other movements. They want to be part of a proactive movement to address these issues. And the economic prosperity agenda that UNIDOSUS is leading, I really think really gets to that. So kudos to you, Mauricio, and the team. And again, the links to be part of this and reach out. And people can just follow We Are Unidos everywhere on social media for a lot of this information. I couldn't let Mauricio, though, leave the show without talking about a couple things. One is, Mauricio, besides just one of my homies, one of the great Colombian American leaders. I was thinking about it, Mauricio. I don't know if I can put you in the top 5 yet. I have these lists, but you're definitely moving up the ranks. You're definitely in the power rankings.
Thank you.
I was thinking about it. Who do you think is, by the way, I was looking it up today, an estimated 1.8 million Colombian Americans.
That's a lot of us, yeah.
About roughly half in Florida, and about a third of y'all in the New York tri-state between the 3 states, and then the rest all over the place. Who do you think is who's more prominent Colombian American? Did I say John Leguizamo? Would you say John Leguizamo?
Yeah, John is huge.
Sofia Vergara, I guess, is a Colombian American at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, she's number one in our hearts. I mean, let's keep it honest. But in terms of prominence in the United States, I think John is probably number one. Right?
He is. He's
been out there for a minute. And he's in the political stuff too.
He's in the political stuff. He grew up in Jackson Heights, where I live. And he raises Jackson up in Queens all the time. He rocks his Mets hat all the time.
Like Leguizamo's been out there. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Hey, respect to Chris Gonzalez on the sports, the Patriot young boy. He did.
That's right.
The best player of the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
That's right.
I mean, two Colombians in the Senate, Ruben Gallego and Bernie Moreno. So y'all are moving up in the political stuff too. A lot of political people in Florida. You know.
Lots of. I would say, Ruben Gallego is one to watch. He's heating
100%.
up. 100%. He's heating up. But yeah, I would put my vote behind John, just because I think what's interesting is that Tu Wong Fu, he goes back to back in the day. He's been doing this so long, and he keeps doing, and he's a vocal person right now, where we need 100%. More folks. So I'm all for
what has been your experience, Mauricio? I think people would be curious. And by the way, on the political side, we have 3 Colombian Americans running for Congress in the Northeast, including Adelina Mejia, who won her primary, so she's most likely going to be the latest congresswoman from New Jersey, who's both going to be the first Dominican woman and first Colombian woman in Congress. She's both. And we got Brian Varela running for Congress in a neighboring district, Carol Obando running in a neighboring district in Pennsylvania. So Colombian Americans, you're going to see a lot more Colombian Americans in politics in the coming months and years. But as a Colombian American, Mauricio, y'all bring a lot to the table. There's no question about it. And I'm just your experience as a Colombian American, kind of in this national Latino work. Your sense of y'all contribution to this. It's really interesting, the diversity amongst the leadership now, and how we don't get enough credit, kind of how we kind of give each other space at these tables. It's really interesting.
It is. I mean, one thing I will say about Colombianos in general, particularly Paisa, you mentioned Paisa power, people from Antioquia or Medellin, or, from what we call Paisa, Los Paisas, they're very entrepreneurial, small businesses, huge. And you see that in Elizabeth, New Jersey, you see that in Jackson Heights, you see it in Fort Myers. So I think, in terms of just that sort of, connecting it to the agenda, that small business power and that employer power is huge. And I think that's something that, I just think about, I joke around I should probably be saying this, but I joke around in that, like, you have people are like, what's your favorite Colombian restaurant in Jackson Heights? I'm like, I don't know. They're all really the same, but they are packed all the time.
Oh, no
They're
doubt.
packed. They're packed. And
I
so,
was just at Noches de Colombia in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and they were like, "Yeah, we have 7 of these." I'm like, "Huh?" It's like a whole chain.
yeah.
Yeah, the formula works, brother.
It works. It works. But I think I'm excited to see more Colombian Americans in positions of power, particularly in political power. I have 2 Colombianas in the New York State Senate, one in New York State, Jessica Ramos, and then Catalina Cruz in the Assembly.
Yeah.
We have some more. We have so many more. So like I'm excited. I'm excited for the New Jersey race. So I'm excited for
a lot of good stuff going on in Jersey and around the country, and and we'll have you back on other times, Mauricio. But culturally, Colombians and Puerto Ricans, there's so many connections.
Yes.
And then with the music, and that ties in with the
Salseros.
music, because the Puerto Ricans with the salsa, then Colombia adopts, like a city adopts it. It makes it like, blows it up, where it's Cali with the salsa, Medellin for the reggaeton. And there's obviously a lot of wonderful cultural connections. I don't know if I ever told you, Mauricio, but my first connection with the immigration conversation when I was a little kid, early 80s, the Latino community in Puerto Rico was overwhelmingly Puerto Rican. There was a Cuban where they get over here, one Dominican family over there, but it was very homogenous. But in the early 80s, we started getting 70s really, but the 80s, the only other visible community when I was a kid, Latino community, was the Colombians. We had Colombian businesses, leaders, friends, church. And I remember 2 different times. I remember one family was from Cali. I don't remember where the other family was from. Where I don't know how my parents identified them in the neighborhood, but they identified a new Colombian immigrant family. And I remember they would bring them over, and my dad would try to give the man like some guidance on where to find a job. And my mom would kind of connect them with social services and the church. And then they would say, hey, teach the kid English, so they would throw the kid at me and I tutor him. So there's a lot of that really kind of introduced me. And my parents made it real clear, like, look, their journeys, not that ours is easy, but theirs is harder than ours. And we got to appreciate that. And so they showed me that the value of having to use our privilege, even at that stage. So there's a lot of wonderful connects. All right, brother, let's get to the hoops. You got 10 more games in the regular season.
Yeah.
Detroit Pistons, for people that don't pay attention, are the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
It's been all year. Excited. It's been all year.
Oh, yeah. Tape the tape. Mauricio, the question is, assuming Cade comes back, Cade Cunningham, your wonderful star players, MVP candidate, had such a wonderful year. How are Piston fans feeling? He's hurt. He's going to come back for the playoffs. Maybe the first game, maybe the first round. The first. You got a real shot here. A real shot.
We have a shot. I think Pistons fans are in disbelief because just 2 years ago we barely won a game, and so we're out of schedule. So I think everyone's euphoric about that. I will say, I hate losing. I went to see the Nets and the Pistons a couple weeks ago, and the Pistons blew them out by like 40, and I love those games. I prefer when they just blow out the other team. But Cade going down was terrible. But the bright side is that they fared well. When he was down earlier in the year, they did really well. They've showed they can win without him. They're going to do that. They're going to need to do that because Boston is right behind. And so I'm feeling good. I'm maybe a glass half empty kind of guy because I don't like to set too many expectations and have them fall. But I if they don't make the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it's I would be sad because they've been killing it. They've been killing it. Cade is, and the last thing I'll say, he has this style that he doesn't look like he's doing, like he's trying so hard. Like
he's like
he
that,
just like
there's guys like that.
SGA.
Dr. J was like that. He was like smooth,
But he just does it. And
Tracy McGrady was like that.
He was like that. But
easy,
But I do say they need a true number 2 or 3 scorer. And then they will.
Everyone kind of feels like you're like a shooter short or to win it. But obviously you can make noise and carry you to the at least the conference final. That's for sure. But shout out to my man Jalen during your center. Him and I are both Roman Catholic guys. Went to the same high school in Philly, and he's a real good kid. And you have a good team. And
Yeah, we do.
Piston fans, fandom is funny because one of the cool things about being a sports fan is that you create these rivalries, or you create these interactions with other fan bases. And so I kind of, and I'm going to just say this year, because I think people generally respect Piston fans. It's like a fan base of character. It's
I
a
hope so.
respectable franchise, and but some other fan bases who are nameless, they're actually more annoying than the team itself.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but good luck to you. If my team could ever get off the injured list, maybe we could hang in there. No, talk about the Sixers love to tease me. So Maxi's hurt, and Embiid finally comes back, and George comes back, and they both combined. They literally scored 80 points yesterday together or something. So it's like, okay, well, don't tease me. You're gonna get
he's
knocked
gonna
out.
miss. He's gonna miss tomorrow's game though.
But he'll miss tomorrow's game, and Paul George will trip on something else, and who knows? But the Pistons stuff's good. Mauricio, any final words here on this episode of the Collazo Show?
No, just thanks to you, and like I said, we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this stuff. So the more we're energized and we can rally around some of these issues and rally around some of this stuff, the better. Reach out. Unidos US is here. We've been here for a long time. We're going to continue to be here to support the community and support this guy who's doing great work, both Unidos and beyond. So I just appreciate it.
Mauricio, appreciate you. Well, good luck to your Pistons, and enjoy the college in Michigan, and Wolverines hanging in there. So
Michigan State, and Michigan,
both. State, hanging in there. So enjoy the weekend and have a wonderful day.
Likewise. Thanks, man.